Hello, Math Study students. Welcome to another online lesson. Today we'll be continuing our discussion of financial mathematics, specifically talking about something known as depreciation. We'll be using our compound interest formula to help us calculate depreciation. So without further ado, we'll take a look at the terms and notation for today. So depreciation is the loss of value over time. You see this very often with things like cars. You buy a new car, you might spend $15,000 on it, and you drive it off the lot of the new car sales place, and the next thing you know, it's not worth nearly as much. A few years later, it's worth far less, and by the time it's really old, unless it's become desirable or collectible, it's worth next to nothing the longer you have it. That's depreciation. Same thing happens with like your cell phones. When you get a new cell phone, it's very exciting. It's very costly perhaps if you're buying the newest one. And then as time goes on, it's not worth as much until the point where it's hardly worth anything and people don't want it at all. That is depreciation. So depreciation is very much like earning interest on something where the value is going up when you put something in the bank, except in reverse. So we can utilize the same formula that's in your formula packet for compound interest, except we still have a final value, so that's how much it'll be worth eventually. We have a original value or a purchase value or present value, past value. P can stand for a lot of things there. We have the same old one that we had before. We have n represents the number of years. It'll never be compounded, so there's no k involved. If you involved a k, the k would just be 1 in both cases because you don't compound it. It's just a annual rate. And then we have our actual rate there. And the rate that is different from when we have regular compound interest is that the rate will always, always, always be negative. And that means that we're no longer gaining value like we would on a compound interest in a bank account, but we're actually losing value over time. All right. So for this first one here, photocopier was purchased for $14,500 and depreciates at 18% each year. So find the value after 5 years. Now we can use our TVM solver, and we can also use just our regular formula. I'll start off by utilizing the formula, and then we'll take a look at it in the TVM solver. So the first thing we need to identify within our formula, we're looking for our final value. We need to identify our present value and our rate. And our number of periods or years in this case. Sorry, so in the formula that would have been an n. All right, so we don't know the final value. I'm going to move my work up here, but we do know the starting value was bought for $14,500. And then we put in our 1 plus our rate, which again, I'm not going to divide by 100. I'm simply going to convert it to a decimal. So 0.18, moving the decimal over 2 spots. And then that's to the power of the 4 years that I originally had. So a little bit simpler because we don't have to worry about compounds. So I'm going to pull up my calculator and plug that in. So we had our original value, 14,500. Times 1 plus 0.18 to the power of 4. No groups or anything like that where I need extra parentheses. I hit enter, and my new value 4 years later, oh, I made a huge mistake. Notice that my answer is 28,000, which is much, much higher. So what did I forget to do? It's my rate. My rate has to be negative. So I'm going to press second enter on my calculator, which brings back what I typed in. Second delete allows me to insert. I put in my negative sign, and now I have a negative rate going on here, or you could essentially just subtract the rate. It gives you the same thing. And now we end up with $6,555.77 approximately. And again, that's much less than the $14,000 that we paid for it originally. It's less than half the value. So after 4 years, it's lost half of its value. Now, how much exactly did we lose? is part B, so we can take our 14,500 that we originally started with and then subtract our answer. I'm going to press second negative sign, which takes that previous answer that I just had, $6,555.77. Press enter, and my new value is $7,944.23. That's what I lost in value. So if I went to sell this again, I've lost nearly $8,000. I also mentioned we could do this on the TVM solver, so I'm going to open that up. Press our apps key, finance, TVM solver. N is our number of periods, N times K, and we know that K is always going to be 1 for depreciation. So we're dealing with 4 years. I put in a 4. Our interest rate was 18%. We leave it as a percent, but the thing to remember, it's got to be negative. So I'm putting in negative 1/8. My original purchase price was $14,500, and again, we have to remember to make sure that our present value is always negative because we either paid money for the copier and didn't have that money anymore, or like when we put it in the bank account. And then our future value is what we're trying to find, so I'll leave that blank. Our payments and compounds per year will always be 1 for depreciation. I will go back to my final value, press alpha enter, and again we see that same value of $6,555.77. And that is depreciation. We'll do one more quick example here. An arcade machine is bought for $8,000 and it is sold 3 years later for $3,500. Calculate its rate of depreciation. So this is a case where it's not a final value that we're looking for. We're actually going to have to do some algebra here. So we can set up an equation for this, which would be, again, using our final value equals present value times 1 plus my rate, which always has to be negative, to the number of years, or at least the number of periods. We know that it's eventually worth $3,500. We know that it was bought for $8,000. The question is, what is our rate? That's the thing we don't know. We know it was over 3 years. So you can do algebra here, divide both sides by 8,000, take both sides to the 1/3 power, subtract the 1, multiply by 100, and that would give us our rate. Or we can use the TVM solver, and that's what I'm going to use to show my work here. So we're starting off with a purchase price. Well, 3 years, I guess, would be our N. Again, there's no K involved, so it's just 3. Our percentage is what we're trying to find, so I'm not going to mess with that for now. Present value, we paid $8,000, so it was a negative $8,000 value. And then we put our future value, we know is $3,500, $3,500. PY, CY both need to be 1. So I'm going to go back up to my interest rate now that everything's been filled in. And I want to know what interest rate or negative rate or depreciation rate I've had over time. Press alpha enter. And so it was 24.1% approximately that I've been losing each year. So losing 24% of its value over time. That is depreciation. There are a few problems in the book, problems number 1 through 5 on page 153. Depreciation has not been on the last several IB tests, but it is on the current syllabus, so it may pop up this year. And so the majority of our practice that we're going to have for it is in the book. Until next time.